on that day, Dr. Sneed, did you perform another autopsy?
I did.
And who did you perform that other autopsy?
Peter Wang.
Showing you states exhibit 115 is already been released from Peter Wang.
Yes.
And now I want to show you these exhibits. 20U, 20T, 20S, 20R, 20Q, 20P, 20O, 20N, 20M, 20L, 20K, 20J, 20I, 20H, and 20G. Dr. Sneed, if you would take a look at these exhibits and let me know if you recognize these in conjunction with your autopsy of Peter Wang.
Yes.
And with these photographs of the autopsy of Peter Wang, assist you in explaining to the court and to the jury, number one, the nature of Peter Wang's wounds,
Yes.
the path of the bullets,
Correct.
and the cause of death of Peter Wang.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I would like to offer those exhibits. 20U.
Do you want me to wait to take them? Do you want me to wait to take them?
Yeah, it'd probably be easier for you than reaching all.
Okay,
20T,
sure.
20S, 20R, 20Q, 20P, 20O, 20N, 20M, 20L, 20K, 20J, 20I, 20H, 20G.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sneed, while the clerk is, or the judge is looking at this page, I'll wait.
Okay, is there any additional objection?
May I brief sidebar, please?
Okay. over the defense objection states 20G, as in George, will be received as 340. 20H will be received as 341. 20I will be received as 342. 20J will be received as 343. 20K will be received as 344. 20L will be received as 345. 20M as in Mary, 346. 20N as in Nancy, 347. 20O, 348. 20P, 349. 20Q, 350. 20R, 351. 20S, 352. 20T, like Tom, 353. And 20U, 354.
Thank you. Dr. Sneed, while the clerk is marking those exhibits, what was the age and the measurements of Peter Wang?
Yes. So it was reported that he was 15 years of age. And you asked for the height?
Pardon?
What else you asked, the age
The
and?
measurements?
Oh, yes.
Height,
He
weight.
was 61 inches, so that's 5'1".
Did you say weight?
The weight, 128 pounds.
Dr. Sneed, I want to show you State's Exhibit marked 340. Tell me what that shows.
So,
If you want to use the telestrator, you can just pick a color and you can insert. It's on the screen.
okay. So I just pointed something. Okay, got it. So what this photograph shows is the right side of Mr. Wang's face and the right side of the head. And it shows on the, what we call the temporal region, which is superior and anterior to the ear. This is an entrance gunshot wound. And on the right cheek, you can see that there's two entry defects, one smaller and one larger, which looks atypical.
Okay, and what did that wound do?
The wound on the right temporal region perforates the cranium, and it creates severe damage on the head. He has these burst-type injuries, meaning multiple cranial fractures. I have to say that wound in association to another wound, which is not really shown in this photograph, but it's on the parietal region, a little bit higher. Those two wounds, the pathways coalesce, right? And so they spent a lot of energy in the head creating these fractures, creating the lacerations of the brain, creating transection of parts of the brain. Parts of the brain were outside of the cranial vault. And then that led to a very large exit defect that involved the left side of the head, which you can see in there. That's...
The wound that you said was higher. Could you show where potentially, on this,
It's not really shown here, but it's around there.
right there?
Yes,
But that's another entrance wound to his head.
correct.
And State's Exhibit, did it exit?
So there were multiple fragments snowstorming, right, in the head when I looked at the x-ray. But these two defects are associated with what we call a gaping exit defect. It's a very large opening of the head on the left side. So sometimes we can see an actual defined exit wound defect, but in this particular case, due to the severity of the injuries, there was no well-defined exit defects for those two wounds on the right parietal and right temporal scalp.
And the wound to the cheek?
So there's two defects, one that's round, right here, and then one that's You can see it. That one that's larger. And those two projectile fragments or projectile perforated the cheek, it fractured the jaw, it perforated the tongue, it fractured the left side of the jaw, and then both of them exited through another gaping large defect that's on the left side of the face near the cheek that you can't see on this photograph.
Okay, so they're pictured here on State's Exhibit 340. That's 4 entrance wounds, 4 gunshot entrance wounds?
Yes,
2 to the head and 2 to the cheek.
correct.
Showing you State's Exhibit mark 342.
How do I erase? I'm sorry.
There's marks, she's asking to erase the marks on the,
Oh,
there's
yeah,
a bunch
I
of
got you.
arrows.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. So what you're seeing on this photograph is the left side of the head. So the two defects in the parietal and temporal region coalesced, and the energy, that is spent created this very large exit wound. You can see that there are lacerations of the skin, the scalp, and you can see fragmented bone in some areas, and then fragments of brain tissue that came out of the cranial vault. On the left cheek anterior to the ear is the exit wound for the 2 entries that coalesced through the oral cavity and perforated bone too at the cranial base, which is, we have a cranial vault, and we still have bones in this area, so it fractured those bones as well. And then they both come out. And again, there's no well-defined exit defect with the amount of energy that was, spent in these tissues.
And now showing you State's Exhibit 341.
So that's, this wound is showing the previously described entry defects on the cheek, and then it's showing 1, 2, 3, 4 defects on the, and you're looking at the right side of the chest near the shoulder region, lateral chest, and those are exit wounds from a projectile that fragmented, right? You have multiple tears or exits of those projectiles and fracture bone. The entry for that is lower, so those are exit wounds on the chest.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit 343.
Right. So here, right. So this is the entrance gunshot wound defect that went through the soft tissues and fracture bones and perforated muscles, and then fragmented and exited through the right side of the chest.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 344. That's a close-up of that. Why did those exit wounds look that?
Why do they look that big? Why do they look that wide? Is that the question?
I'm sorry?
I didn't understand the question. Are you asking?
No, why do those exit wounds look like that?
Why? Yes. So rifle injuries tend to have a lot of, they're high velocity, and the more velocity, the more energy, what they call kinetic energy, is spent in the tissues. And it's not like one size fits all. Not all entries look the same, not all exits look the same. Part of the reason why these tissues tend to look different is, one, because it depends on how many times the projectile fragmented and exited. It also depends if the projectile takes bone with it on the way out. And also it depends on the density of the muscle and the elasticity of the skin. So, for example, in this area on the chest and near the axilla, the skin is a little bit more lax, right? The muscle, the density of the muscle also comes into play. And when you have all that energy, the projectile creates what's called a temporary cavity. So it's not only that it perforates, it's not only the pathway through which it goes, I should have explained this with the head, it's also the energy that the projectile imparts into creates an expansion of sorts of the tissues, right? And that expansion leads to injuries that look like that.
And now showing you State's Exhibit 345.
Okay. So what you're looking at in this photograph is, so this is towards the back, this is the right hip, and this is the buttock region. And so this is a entrance gunshot wound defect below the buttock on the right thigh, posteriorly.
And where did it go?
That particular projectile goes through the soft tissues and it fractured, let me refer to my notes, I believe the acetabulum. If you give me 1 second to refer to my notes, please. Yes, the acetabulum and the iliac bone. So where your hip bone, we have, the hip bone has an area where the femur, which is the long bone of the thigh, connects with it. That little area that receives the head of the femur is called the acetabulum. And then the bone superior to that is called the iliac bone. So this particular pathway fractures those bones as well. And then the wound exits through the right side of the abdomen.
Okay. Showing you State's Exhibit 346.
Yes. So what we're seeing here, so this is the umbilicus, the belly button. I'm sorry, for some reason. There you go. And this is the right hip area here, and you can see this is the lower abdomen, and you can see this defect. This is the exit defect for that entrance that was posterior below the buttock. And there were fragments underneath the skin, and that's what's creating, this bruise here.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 347.
So what we're seeing on this photograph, this is the entry wound that I previously described, right, below the buttock. Here you see the top of the, this is the top of the thigh, this is the hip area, this is the knee area, and on the lateral aspect of the right knee, that's the right side, you see the entry wound defect, and this went through the soft tissues and muscles and exited through a defect that was more focal proximal or more superior on the right thigh.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 348.
Right, so I on the top of the thighs, the previously described wounds, what you're seeing here is the another defect on the right foot, on the right side of the foot, which I identified as an exit gunshot wound defect. And not really well seen is another defect on the back of the heel.
And State's Exhibit 349.
So on the top of the photograph, you see his head, and this is his right shoulder region. This defect is an entrance gunshot wound, and it's on the back of the right arm.
Okay. And where did it go?
So this particular gunshot wound goes through, fractures the humerus, which is the arm bone, and it continues through the soft tissues. And so the pathway of this particular gunshot wound coalesces or comes in contact, right, with the exit wounds that I previously described on the right side of the chest that enter on the right side of the lateral aspect of the chest.
And State's Exhibit 350.
So there's a lot of glare on the top of the photo, but yes, thank you. What you're seeing here is, so When we put the numbers, we try to do it so that we can talk about the anatomic position, right, which is standing up, palms forward. But so that's why the number is here. So it may be a little bit confusing, but this here is the head. This is the cluster of gunshot wounds that I described on the right side of the chest. So what you're seeing here is in this position a tangential gunshot wound of the right elbow, and is showing. It's a gaping wound, it's a very large wound, and it's showing the fractured bones associated to the gunshot wound.
And State's Exhibit 351.
Right. So, can you take off the, Mr. Satz, can you take away the markings?
Oh, yeah. No, sorry.
Thank you. So in this wound, you're seeing the left side of Mr. Wang. Here's his left ear. That's the exit wound that I described on the face. This is the shoulder region. And here you can see there's a, that's the entry wound, and this is the exit wound. This particular wound is also associated with fractures of the left arm bone. And then you're seeing other injuries that include abrasions and contusions, but no defects in that area.
And were you able to determine the cause of death of Peter Wang?
Yes,
What was the cause of death?
multiple gunshot wounds.
How many gunshot wounds did he get?
So in total, there were 12. We haven't shown here another 2 defects that were atypical on the back of the left forearm, elbow region. That they were not like a perforating wound, but they had, they look like ballistic type of wounds, right? Something hits and then the fragments may have hit that area. It wasn't going through and through. In total, it was 12.
Okay. And of those 12, how many were lethal in and of themselves?
The 4 defects of the head, the 4 wounds of the head.
Okay. And